Imagine learning the fundamentals of branding at 11 years old while standing behind the counter of your parents' Chinese restaurant. Today's guest, Henry Wong, learned how to read people, tell a story, and create connection, skills that would eventually carry him into the world of advertising. But over the years, he built an award-winning career, ran agencies, and he helped some of the world's biggest brands figure out who they really are. But at some point, he realized something a lot of successful professionals eventually discover. Success can be seductive. The awards, the recognition, the access, it can all become a loop that pulls you deeper into a career that looks great on the outside, but slowly drifts away from the life you actually want on the inside. So Henry stepped back and he reinvented himself, this time around authenticity, family, and purpose. Today, Henry helps individuals and organizations discover the one word that defines their brand and how they show up in the world. And his story is a great reminder that sometimes the bigger career pivot isn't about changing jobs. It's about changing your identity. So without further ado, please enjoy Henry Wong and his clocking out journey. Henry, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Raymond. Thank you so much for having me aboard.
I am really excited about our conversation today for a couple of reasons. One, you wrote a book that is titled Telling Your Story, and you sent it over. I had an opportunity to read through it, and with your background as a brand expert, and you actually call yourself the brand doctor, which I think is really cool. We're going to jump into that. But I read your book, Telling Your Story, and what really struck me was this phrase that I read. Henry didn't just change careers. You actually reframed your identity. And for someone who is in sort of the branding world, you're teaching people how to show up and how to brand themselves. And I bet one of the biggest challenges that you had early on was really evolving your identity as a branding doctor. And I thought it was so incredibly inspiring and cool how you almost like created this playbook for people to use, but it was almost like your transformation at the same time. And so I'm excited to share the work that you're doing to our listeners, because when you think about clocking out and someone is thinking about leaving their job and changing their identity, your story is almost like the perfect playbook for them to relate to as they're going through their own journey. So very excited to kind of dig in here today, and appreciate you carving out some time.
No, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for taking the time to read the book. It certainly was a enjoyable process to get everything that I had in my heart and my mind out and on paper. One of the things I did find was, because I spent a fair amount of time helping organizational brands tell their story, and many people would approach me, and some could afford the fees and others couldn't. I really want to make this thinking accessible to everybody. So book, there's so much knowledge out there. Picking up books, picking up interviews, looking at videos, and that is a terrific way to build your self-knowledge. And I want to contribute to that whole ecosphere of self-knowledge that people can attain.
Mm. Well, I appreciate that, Henry, and I know that it wasn't a linear path for you to get to where you are today. So why don't we start from the beginning? Tell us where you're from, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so we were just talking earlier, of course, comparing our notes. We're both in sort of winter land at the moment. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and grew up with a lot of backyard hockey. At the same time, I think my own journey was I find it a little bit interesting, because my first language was actually Chinese. I grew up in the back of a Chinese restaurant. I've always found it quite interesting that I now, even though English is ended up being my second language and my primary language. I now work in an industry. I work in a type of profession that communication and the polish of English skills is particularly important to helping my clients and helping further everything I've created.
So tell me, what was it like growing up in the back of a Chinese restaurant? And is that what your parents did?
Yeah, my parents ran a Chinese restaurant, of course, and I think as soon as you are of some suitable age that you could stand and hold maybe a paring knife, you were thrown into the kitchen. So that was me. So spent many hours peeling potatoes, peeling carrots, and helping out in the back. When I became old enough, because I spoke a little bit more English than my parents at the time, they put me up front of house to handle some of the cash and work with the customers. And I found that quite funny as well, because here was a little 11-year-old who could barely look over the counter, entertaining guests. And the one thing I found, and I think back on some of how I got to where I am, the storytelling or the things that I shared or the jokes that I shared helped that tip jar. And I realized that the more I could spin a tale or talk or engage with customers, it was quite rewarding. And it didn't really come back until I wrote the book years later and thinking about this journey of storytelling and how important that is in shaping people's careers.
So that's so interesting. So your parents were running a Chinese restaurant in Toronto. You were a young boy working in the kitchen. Over time, as you got older, you got promoted to the front. And do you remember any particular story that that was popular with the patrons?
I think it was just a quick retort or a quick comeback on things. I think a lot of it was just simply letting people be heard. It was a wonderful education in life because anyone who's worked in the restaurant business can learn so much about dealing with people in general, customer service, all walks of life. We had everybody from truck drivers to families to people who would simply come in on a date, even biker gangs and the like. So you learn the gamut of people who you would, there'd be variations of the same type of people that you would deal with later in career. So I think that was a wonderful sort of life building skills that you don't think about at the time. You just think, I'd rather be outside playing and not be here, dealing with all the headaches of a little kid trying to survive in a restaurant.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you, at an early age, were able to connect this sort of, I'll call it performer, but communicator with guests, and just making that connection with them, and then that leading to them giving a tip or, for services. I think that is such a great life lesson. And I wonder, did that have any impact on what you wanted to be? Like, did you see yourself working in the restaurant, or did you have other dreams?
I think like many immigrant parents, they have aspirations well beyond their, place at the time. So, but interesting enough, my father was always had that entrepreneurial mindset. And so, as I was growing up through everything, he always encouraged to start my own business. So I would think about, and as a kid, you go through all these different phases, what you'd like to be. I want to be a photographer. I want to be an architect. I want to be a lawyer. Every one of those, he always thought of a way in which I could create my own business. So I think that was very much instilled in me. And I think it was because of his own background of coming to North America with very little and being able to build himself up through his own hard work was really the life lesson he wanted to share, and being able to control my destiny in the best way I could.
Wow. That's really cool. It sounds like he was a great role model for you and had a tremendous amount of influence on your upbringing, but ultimately your career in general. What did you decide in terms of an education?
Well, funny enough, I I think, like many children of immigrant parents, you're pushed to excel in education. So I was quite fortunate in that, for whatever reason, I was blessed with some decent brain cells that I could do well in school. The funny thing was, I after high school, I had applied to numerous universities, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I got accepted into business school. I got accepted into economics, university. I even applied for phys ed because that was really interesting to me. But the one thing that was super difficult to get in was media studies program in university. And that required an essay, it required an interview. And I thought, if I'm accepted to this is the path, because it seemed to be the most difficult and challenging one to get in. So there I was. I managed to get into the program, and embarked on film and media studies, and that sort of set my career for becoming initially a journalist after school, and then eventually onto ad agency world.
Wow. So you had influence from your parents in the degree you chose, or did they give you sort of the space to pick what you felt was going to be fulfilling to you?
I think I was just had my own mind. I think at that time my parents would have preferred a more traditional profession, and I think it's funny, they kept encouraging me to take on something a little bit more of the set profession, like legal, like accounting, things that I realized that would have been okay, but wouldn't have made me happy. And even I think at a young age, I studied a lot of philosophy, and the idea of finding one's happiness was, I think, built into me right from the beginning, and that was really my own self-learning. And then as the years went on, and I managed to do well within the advertising world, I was making more than a doctor or a lawyer anyway. So I think eventually they came back to being proud of me.
Yeah, that's so interesting how you feel that pressure, from your family where, they have ideas of what they think you should do. And kudos to you for leaning into really what your heart was telling you should do. And it sounded like you pursued an academic journey that really aligned with where your identity was at the core. And I guess in looking back, any life lessons that you think about in terms of the path that you chose versus kind of like where you are today?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much the actual linear path, but the approach, I think, is something I definitely would share with people. I've had the privilege of being in positions where I would hire my creative staff. So I was creative director of one of the largest ad agencies in North America, well, actually globally. But it gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of people, hire a lot of people. And within the creative field, you get people who come from all walks of life. And that was super interesting. I'd have taxi drivers, musicians, former lawyers want to be a copywriter or a designer, or they wanted to contribute some way within the creative field. And it was fascinating to me, because looking at their journey, I realized that many people get set on a certain path, and then maybe mid-career or into their as they're approaching, I guess, their next quarter in life, they realize, wow, this isn't really what I want to do in life, and they're looking for the change. So my lesson, I think, or my share really is try to find what you want to do right from the beginning, and I think that is more a recipe for happiness. So many of us think that perhaps we're often in a situation where we're just trying to exist in life, make ends meet, and so forth. But I think we hear so much from advisors, do what excites you, find what you're passionate about. And I think that's element one in the equation, because sometimes doing what you're passionate about may not allow you to survive financially. I would encourage people to figure out what you do really, really well and find the thing that the profession that excites you and ignites that passion based on your skill, because you find that when you do something really well and you're able to make a living from it, that's part one. But the other side of it is finding a variation of using that skill, whatever that might be. So for me, I just happened to be able to put words together. For some reason, I could write and I could put words together. And I didn't know what sort of jobs existed for that other than maybe just simply becoming a writer or a journalist. But as I went through my journey, I found that I was quite creative and I could come up with ideas that could be applicable in the world of advertising. And that sort of launched my career on that side.
Wow. Henry, that is so interesting. I think it's very relatable where a person who is early in their life, where they're thinking about a career, they have this term called identity suppression, where you choose a career for some reason other than what your own dreams and desires are. It could be for financial, you want to build a house, you want to make a certain kind of income, but it isn't necessarily connected to what you believe your calling is. And it's interesting because you chose the career of interest. And I feel like when you align to your interest and values, income and money will come. Like, you will find a way to make and earn a living. And so I think that really resonates with me, and I believe it's going to resonate with a lot of listeners, is that, choosing a path of what, again, aligns with your values and interests will set you up for success versus suppressing an identity that isn't really connected to who you are as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a firm believer in that. Ultimately, each of us are just trying to find our form of happiness, and hopefully work and your chosen profession aligns with it. There's so many of us, have been brought up to think there's life after work. My true joy is what I do after 5 or what I'm going to do during retirement. But you look at particularly, I guess, as the population age, and there's so many people still working, and it's not some of it. I see that people have to, but the ones that seem to get super excited about life, who have this embrace of life, are the ones who are continuing to do what they want into later years.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. So tell me, when was the moment when you started to get an itch to do something different in terms of, I know you started a company at some point. When did you start to feel like the career that you were in at the moment wasn't necessarily going to continue to fulfill you, and you started to think about something different?
Yeah, I was, with one of the large ad agencies, ample opportunity. I was in a great position where many opportunities were available to me in other cities globally, and that was super exciting. At the same time, and I'm sure many people have gone through this as well, the more you spend on your career and your profession, the less you're able to spend on your family. And I had a growing family at the time, and I realized that it was either one or the other, unfortunately. And I chose to, rethink how I existed in my profession. So I had the opportunity to join a very small firm in which I was given a partnership, but that would give me more of a local job. It would give me the opportunity to be at home more, and I embraced that. And so I was able to find a balance of both. But at the same time, I didn't realize that I was at the heart a business person. I was a businessman. I could help run a business, and I could, go back to what my father in many ways encouraged me to do, which was to run my own show. And over the years, I was able to build up a nice entity with that. And within, I guess, this last 25 years, I've bought and sold agencies, invested in companies, and it's been super rewarding that way. I think the one thing, I'll just add to this, of course, is that I realize it isn't just a skill set that you can bring to furthering your position, furthering your profession. It's really the type of engagement, the way you can engage with clients. And one of the things that was eye-opening in the beginning was, and for me, it was always trying to figure out, that formula to success. How do I replicate it time and time again? Is there a process? Is there something that I'm missing that can encourage, success as I build up my enterprise? And I remember asking the client once, because when you don't win a piece of business, you try to dissect it, and you even ask for a interview to find out what you did wrong. And there's a number of things, but I began asking clients why they chose us. And it was really quite telling, because he said, you know what? You guys have the same processes as another agency, another firm. You have the awards, the process. You have people with the same sort of take on things. You have a similar amount of experience. What it really came down to me was, who would I like to have lunch with? Who would I enjoy spending all my time with? And he said, I want to have lunch with you, Henry. And that was really a soft mallet over the head. I thought, I never realized how important it was to be the person that you are, be yourself, be engaging, to connect with people, not in an insincere or inauthentic way, but they seem to, for whatever reason, gravitate to me based on my manner and the way I approached business and life.
I love that. So I want to go back. I want to touch on what you said earlier. And one of the pivotal moments for you was this sort of pull to your family. And you were working in the corporate kind of job. You did a lot of traveling, worked probably lots of hours. And at some point you were faced with the realization that, you have a family, you have kids, and it was, you felt this pull to having more of a balance with your family. And I wonder, was there a struggle with sort of the perception of kind of leaving and not walking away, but just sort of wanting to have that balance and not be 100% all in into the corporate world?
I don't think it was so much a moment, but as it was more of a build up and a realization that maybe the life I've created, as financially successful as it is, what isn't really where I wanted to be. There's an interesting thing about the advertising world. I would say at the time it was a rung below sports and entertainment. It was such a exciting business, because you're producing and writing and creating commercials that people see on air, and you became a little bit of a minor celebrity of sorts within your industry. If you did an award-winning campaign, you'd be talked about, you'd be written about, you would have access to, the finest restaurants just because of the position and so forth. And it's very seductive and it's very alluring in that way. But at the same time, it was also the realization this isn't really fulfillment, and this isn't necessarily happiness, because it's that hit of the next. You might enjoy it, but you want to get the next award-winning campaign. You want to get to the next sort of hit of dopamine, and it's no way to maintain a happy, sustainable life. So at the same time, while one builds up, the other one decreases. And that was the family side, and the realization that I needed to maybe go to the what was, many people in the industry would have considered the minor leagues at the time. Yeah. In the end, it did work out, because I built up an agency of 40 people at the time, and we were quite successful, and I had a balance in life. More importantly, I was able to find that element in life that wasn't just waiting for me to retire.
That's great. I appreciate that. what came to mind was when you were describing how people were wanting to spend time with you. And I think the fact that your identity sort of evolved where, you were very focused on your career and getting the recognition of being an expert and a leader in your industry, but you evolved your identity to be a family person as well. And that became really important to you. And I think people, I think authenticity is the core of you as a human, and you being authentic and really, sort of evolving your identity to be inclusive of your family and the things that you like in your career, and aligning all of those things together. People want to spend time with people who are like that.
I think you're very much right. And I can't say I was 100% successful in being a family man and being the father I should have been, but I think the heart was there at least. There's no rule book, as I'm sure with your own son, that any sort of guide or any advice is it goes up right out the window, because we're all human beings and we interact differently.
Yeah, that's great. So what was the next? You launched a company at some point.
Yeah. So the partner I had was a good, I guess, 20 years older. He was an older gentleman who had run a successful small agency for many years, and name was Bob Mitchner. And unfortunately, I had the utmost respect for him. Unfortunately, he ended up developing early onset dementia, which grew into an Alzheimer's diagnosis, and I realized that we couldn't carry on with the business. So I ended up brokering the agency for sale, and we ended up selling to another agency. I became part of that new one, and then a number of years later, he passed away. At that point, I realized I needed a little bit of a reset on how I approach things. And I had always sort of depended on partners and people to help me prop up a business, because I was relying on their knowledge and expertise, and maybe perhaps not quite having the confidence that I should have had. And I realized I could do this on my own. So 2016, I decided to create a small consultancy called View. And the idea behind it was to work only with impact companies to have a positive effect on the world, and bring in people who I could teach and who wanted to contribute to doing well, using our skills, using our creative and marketing ability to help companies that want to contribute in a positive way to the greater global world. So I thought that was a great way to maybe taper off and do a little bit less. And in fact, what I found at the time was that that whole mission attracted a lot of businesses who really wanted to have someone, to your point, who authentically wanted to help them succeed, as opposed to just simply looking at the billings.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Was it hard to transition from the ad agency after selling it to launching this new business? What was that transition like?
I think it was a variation of the same sort of business. So within advertising, you buy and sell ads, you buy and sell social media, you create the campaigns. What I did find was there's a certain amount of impermanence to that. You create a campaign, and it may be touted and might win awards. It might push the needle in terms of sales. It disappears. It's fleeting. So people forget it. There's something powerful about brands that sustain itself. So this is where I began moving into more the branding side, because I realized product on the shelf that will stay, that sign on a building, whether it's Nike or Apple, there's an impermanence to the brand itself. It's long lasting, and I want to find ways to contribute to it. At the same time, I was developing a whole process of learning to tell brand stories, because the brand, just a side lesson for your listeners, brand isn't the logo. It isn't the what you see or the product and that. It's what you believe it to be. It's the story behind it. And I found that by helping brands and organizations with their story, I could help shape the direction they could go. And that was much more satisfying and profound than simply creating a campaign. So with that, I began developing an entire methodology around exacting a brand and building the story from it.
Wow. That's so cool. So I appreciate you sharing that, because it feels like the ad agency with your partner was more transactional. You know, you had campaigns, you would deliver the campaigns for your customers, but the building of a new identity in a new story, and you're sort of reframing how you identify as a brand, and then ultimately how that story would permeate and translate to other brands and young entrepreneurs who are starting out. You know, you're able to sort of guide them through your own experience to help them kind of create their own story for the businesses that they're building. And I bet it was a really fun start. I bet it was scary too.
Yeah, I think there's several things that I think happen as you just spend more time in the saddle. You just become more knowledgeable, more experienced, and you find you could get to the answer sooner than when you were younger. And I think that's where that confidence really builds. And it's the old adage, I wish I knew then what I knew now. And it's so true, because you could accelerate things much faster with that level of knowledge. So being able to share experience and being able to walk into a boardroom and help direct the narrative and the positioning of what that company or organization's brand stood for was super satisfying, because it had more of a deeper effect on people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I do think that the buildup and the journey to get to the place that you're in, it's so much more rewarding and satisfying when you go through that learning process to get to where you are, where now you really have the confidence and you can see clearly, with clarity, what it would take for an individual or an organization to really elevate themselves to the next level. And the fact that you went through the messiness to get to where you are today, that story in and of itself is so powerful.
Oh, thank you. If I had to do it again, I would probably have sought out more mentors and more guides and tried to learn from other people's mistakes. One of the things I do is I take on a mentee every year, and I coach them. I've done this pretty much most of my business career. In and itself, it's a wonderful learning experience, because you have to dissect what you know to share with other people, so you actually become better at what you do by understanding your own journey along the way. And I wish I had more of that. I did have some mentors who guided me in the craft of the work itself, but in terms of running a business, I think I had the opportunity. I would have sought out people the way others do these days. It just accelerates things, and you can learn not from your mistakes, but maybe from other people's mistakes. And I think if there's any bit of advice, that would be it. Learn from other people's mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think mentors along the way can be incredibly powerful, especially when they're good listeners, when they really can understand your challenges and then provide examples of ways that they've been able to kind of navigate through some of those tricky challenges. Yeah. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, Henry. So you started View, and you also wrote a book called Telling Your Story. When did the idea come up that you were going to write a book, and how did that sort of align with View as an organization?
I think I always had the methodology in mind, and it was a number of years ago, even before I started View, where a political group came to me and had loved a campaign I created and said, "Can you do this for our candidate?" And I thought about it for a moment, and I thought, yeah, this is the same sort of process applies in terms of doing an audit of gaining insights, working out their positioning within the market, their position, what their message should be, and then building the story around it. So that sort of stuck with me for a number of years, and I over the course of my business career, I've helped CEOs and managers and professional athletes and the occasional celebrity help with their brand and develop the story around it. So back, I guess, when COVID hit, unfortunately, a lot of things were shut down, including business. Business had dried up suddenly. So I took the time to actually write the book because I had a little bit more bandwidth. And I approached it very much the same sort of way. The Saturdays I would just spend writing and putting things down onto the computer and building enough that a publisher was interested in getting the book out. And that's really how it came to bear.
Wow. So you were using the book the inspiration came from the work that you were doing, essentially, and it was this politician that you were helping promote, tell their story to run for office, essentially.
Yeah, I think just being able to, and I guess it's breaking down your methodology, thinking about how I approach things, and if I were to teach someone how to do it, how would it be? And that essentially became the chapters in the book, step by step. So it turned out to be a nice sort of self-help guide to building your own brand. And the heart of every brand, and whether our discussion isn't necessarily around brand, but certainly people in their career should think of themselves as having a brand. And a brand isn't your name or the reputation per se, but it's the story that people associate with it, so that they can understand what you're all about and ascribe certain wonderful attributes that you've built up over time to connect with them. So all of that is very helpful in terms of finding your place, particularly it's a competitive workplace, it's a competitive market. So using, thinking of yourself in terms of a brand, it can be quite helpful in terms of building your reputation up.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I want to kind of reflect for a second on if you're a person who isn't necessarily connected to themselves as a brand, and let's say they're in a career and maybe they're not fulfilled, but they ultimately are looking to pivot to sort of building an identity that has brand qualities. How do you start to sort of think about your interests? Like, if you're in a position where you're not being fulfilled today, how does one begin to sort of think about what a new identity could look like? Do you have any advice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again, it parallels very much with a brand. When we go in and we look to reset a brand or redefine that brand, we do a current assessment of where that brand is today. So I outlined something very similar. You do assessment of who you are today and what you stand for. And there's any number of, you could hire someone to give you a test. You could do a self-help test. There's any range of things. And no doubt you have ones that you could certainly advise people to follow, Raymond. And I talk a little bit about that, everything from Enneagrams through to Myers-Briggs to determine what you're all about. So part of that is really finding out and figuring out what you are as an individual, what your strengths and weaknesses are. It could be a bit of a SWOT test, which is your strength, weaknesses, where are the opportunities, what are the threats to my ability, any way you want to do it, get a fair look at yourself, meaning it's not just based on the way you see yourself, but the way others see yourself. So quite often when I'm helping a person with their brand, I'll interview the people around them, their colleagues, their family, the people who they've interacted, to get a full picture, because there's your perspective of what you're about versus the way other people, excuse me, look at you. Somewhere in the middle, there's that ultimate truth, and what you're trying to find is what you're all about. From that, you determine what you potentially stand for. There's a key sort of position that you can occupy in the market, and there's an exercise that I run people through to determine what they could potentially stand for. Once you know what you stand for in terms of that, perhaps a one word, and again, this comes from the world of branding, because if I say Volvo, what do you think of? And the word is typically safety. When I say Nike, it's winning competition, Apple innovation. So each of us have a word that we could potentially stand for. And I think the idea is to find that one word that you could stand for. Once you have that, that becomes your guiding light. This is how I want to show myself to the world. And everything that I do, whether it's social media, whether it's building up my resume, whether it's building a skill set and letting people know what I'm all about, it's owning that single word. And from that, you build an entire story and ethos around it. And it's quite fascinating the way people can approach it. But if you can understand what you're all about, I think that's the first step in getting to where you need to be or where you want to be in terms of success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that means your assessment and the work that you're doing, this is for both the individual and the organization. So it really doesn't matter. Like, it sounds like the principles that you're describing on this branding is connected to both an individual who is looking to brand themselves as a person, or an organization who is looking to rebrand themselves as a company or a product.
Exactly. I think you captured it quite well, because in many ways you are a marketable product. If you're trying to succeed in in your career, you have to, in many ways, think of yourself as a product. It's still authentic to yourself, but you have to think of yourself as a brand, and how people view you, how they connect with you, what you mean to them, what the benefits are if I interact with you. All that come into bear.
Mm. Yeah. So the one word that I wrote down for clocking out is freedom.
That's for yourself, or?
Well, I was just thinking about the podcast and how, these interviews are really designed to provide inspiration to people who are in a career or a situation that isn't fulfilling to them. And what I hear oftentimes is sort of this restrictive situation. And it could be working in a corporate job, or it could be, working in some kind of situation that doesn't really provide them with the freedom and flexibility to express themselves. And what I find is that when you get to the other side and you ultimately find the career and the one thing that really brings you ultimate fulfillment, there's a sort of a freeing component to that, like this freedom that you experience that. And I wonder if that's a feeling that you have with the work that you're doing with View.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite interesting because your whole theme is about clocking out, but sometimes it's just more of a natural evolution in things. And me being a little bit later in my career, I've look back on my own journey because I'm entering into another phase, and this is not untypical of many people who get later in their career, in that they feel that they still have a lot to contribute to society. And the tendency is, well, maybe I'll take a lower paying version of the same sort of job, or I'll do a fractional stint as well. I've taken it a little bit differently, where I've embraced a lot of advisor roles that can be quite rewarding, both financially and for yourself intellectually. So you build up a certain amount of knowledge, and with that, I found that I have a gift of sharing stories, of talking, and that's allowed me to build up an entire sort of speaking career that has brought me to different cities to share these concepts, share these sort of ideas. It's allowed me to, begin the aspect of a second book. So my encouragement to people is to take the knowledge you have and create value around it. It's not an hourly rate. There's a wonderful value with the knowledge that you have that you can share people, and there's a price that can go along with it. The idea of speaking is a wonderful sort of buildup of the, final part of my career, which allows me to now teach. I once learned, I wrote a book years ago for a client, and it was called What Would Harold Do? And it allowed me to interview over 100 different entrepreneurs. And the one thing that stuck with me was a gentleman who ran a martial arts dojo, and he said, I used to be the person who had all the knowledge, and I was the manager. Now I'm the manager of inspiration, and I find that quite rewarding. And I thought that was a wonderful way of putting it, because at this stage, you can be that manager of inspiration. You can be that manager of knowledge that you can share with people so that they can accelerate their own journey as well. And I find that part quite rewarding.
I love it. That's so inspiring. I made a note here that the third chapter of your life is referred to as the returning years. And so it's sort of like there's 3 chapters. There's the learning years, which is chapter 1. Chapter 2 is the earning years. And then chapter 3 is the returning years. And when you just described that story, it made me think about you're sort of returning to your value and the value that you can sort of bring to the world. And oftentimes that returning years has some sort of connection to a legacy, where it's sort of like, what is the impact that I'm going to have through the work that I'm doing? And in your case, your ability to share your stories with people about,
and hopefully some of the lessons and the knowledge. I think that's super rewarding.
I love it. So, any final thoughts, Henry, in terms of advice that you can share to people who are, trying to identify as a brand or connect with a new identity? Any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
There's a wonderful line, of course, by Shakespeare, which is, to thine own self be true. And I think that's so applicable to many of us. A lot of us get caught up in this journey, and we lose sight of who we are. And I think it's so important to stay fundamental to your core self, and find the best way to bring that to life through your job, through your life, and just enjoy the journey as much as the destination.
Wow. That is so well said. And I think it's so fitting as a wrap up, because I think back of when you were that little boy in your parents' restaurant, telling stories, and I think that journey sort of played through all the way till where you are today, and you're continuing to tell stories and inspire people. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some insights around the work that you're doing. Your book is called Telling Your Story, and I would say this is the playbook to building brands and telling your own personal story. And so, Henry, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time.
Raymond, it's been wonderful to spend time with you, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment to say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you'd like to hear more on Clocking Out, we'd love for you to take a second and click follow of your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. You can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Just search Clocking Out with Raymond Lee and hit subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to check out our episode polls or just drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you or someone you know has a story to share about navigating change, taking a risk, or rethinking your career, we want to hear from you. Head to the link in our show notes and fill out the form to be considered for a future episode. Until next time, remember, if you're just sitting there thinking that you're stuck or you're unsure of your career or future and you think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.